Number 10. Kid Omega. We're living in a very different world now in terms of mutant history. One where no death is considered final, where Marvel has kind of acknowledged the trope of comic book resurrection and given it to mutants as a gift to make them even more powerful. The Five are a mutant group who can bring back any fallen mutant to life. As such, despite Quentin Quire having a recent and very gruesome death in the comics, we see him up and back to joining his teammates in the following issue of X-Force after his death. In case you're wondering how he goes, Quentin has his head blown off in an explosion, and while Wolverine is split in two and seems to still kind of be moving afterwards, Kid Omega doesn't have those kinds of abilities. So he likely needs help from the Five to return. Although we don't see it, but you can assume, one can assume that's what happens. Because, yeah, I don't think he can just be like, my head's gone, I'm fine. Number 9. Lady Mastermind. Lady Mastermind, aka Reagan Wingard, recently popped back up in the giant-sized Nightcrawler comics and was welcomed into the mutant nation of Krakoa. Some, however, may not know or appreciate her mutant history and background. Just who is Lady Mastermind? Well, she's the daughter of Jason Wingard, aka the original villain known as Mastermind. Her powers take after her father's, allowing her to create realistic illusions projected into her target's minds. While she also has an even lesser known suspected half-sister, Reagan's powers are often depicted as being the more powerful between the two, with it even being said that her abilities are even more stronger than her father's. Additionally, she is also fairly skilled in hand-to-hand combat, a skill set her father actually very much lacked. He was hilarious in a fight. He's like a rag doll. Sorry, Mastermind. Number 8. Sabretooth. Resurrected only to be put down again, Sabretooth had found himself becoming a good guy following the events of Axis. It was a strange direction for him, but also at the same time kind of great. Wolverine even allowed him to be in charge of the Weapon X team, which was rebranded to Weapon X Force under Sabretooth's leadership. In the end, Victor ended up going to hell and sacrificing himself to save his team and to free his son Graydon, who was trapped in hell. Sabretooth himself was prepared to face an eternity of torment for all the bad that he'd done in his life, but feeling good about his final choice. He lost his mind in the process of this sacrifice, becoming feral once more. Marduk, who is sometimes known as Satan in the world of Marvel, was not interested in tormenting a man who had redeemed himself fully and was also not really aware of what was going on with him being feral and all. Instead, he decided to release Sabretooth on the world again, encouraging him to once again earn his place in hell and returning Sabretooth to his villainous roots. So out into the world he goes, super feral, just now he's a villain again. That's okay, he's trapped now, but still sad. Number 7. Wolverine. When you've been around as long as Wolverine, you're entitled to a few deaths, and Wolverine has definitely had his fair share of deaths. One such death and subsequent resurrection took place over the course of a few stories, namely the death of Wolverine and the hunt for Wolverine, where we'd found out that he'd been resurrected. He died after saving test subjects from having their skeletons infused with adamantium, which of course happened to him. However, in doing so, he was forced to cover himself in the metallic liquid, sacrificing himself as eventually it hardened around him, encasing him and leaving him without any oxygen to breathe, so he suffocated. Eventually, he was buried after Kitty Pryde phased him out of his casing, but he would later be resurrected and used as a weapon by Persephone, before managing to heal, truly returning to life, and breaking free of her control. And then, of course, he became the Wolverine that we got again. Yay. Because Wolverine can't die, right? He's too popular. It's never gonna happen. Number 6. CYPHER. CYPHER finds himself resurrected after he was killed by a bullet when Selene brings him back using the transmode virus. Originally, he was also under her control, kind of like what happened to Wolverine, and was used to attack his fellow teammates and his friends. But after his connection to Selene was severed, his own personality returned to him. And I think the best thing personally about Doug Ramsey's resurrection is for him it was actually used to make him stronger. This is something we see sometimes in the comics when characters come back to us, and for him I really loved this. Before, CYPHER's powers weren't as extraordinary, but once resurrected, he can read all aspects of language. So that's including physical language, making him a skilled fighter, and technology as well. He can actually speak to computers. He is even shown to understand architecture as though it were a language, capable of reading the weak spots in a building simply by looking at it. I couldn't even imagine if architecture was a language. You just look at a building and you're like, I know everything about it now. I talked to that building. Number 5. MAGIK. Young Illyana may have tragically died of the legacy virus, but Belasco still had a piece of her, and that was all he needed to resurrect her. Well, he had a piece of her soul anyways, not like an ear or something. That would be weird. Limbo was currently being ruled by Amanda Sefton, and Belasco planned to bring Illyana back so that he might use her to overthrow Amanda and regain control of Limbo. He used a bloodstone that contained a potion of magic soul in order to bring her back, but only had enough of her soul to bring her back in her Darkchild form. Now, this version of Illyana unfortunately lacked a soul of its own, making it pretty useless to Belasco, actually. Eventually, she would join back up with the X-Men, get her soul sword back, and control of Limbo back, and through the destruction of a bloodstone, regain her soul. Woohoo! But it would be a bit of a journey. Still, I like her Darkchild form with her horns and such. Pretty good. Number 4, Cyclops. Maybe one of the oddest resurrection to date. Time to get timey-wimey. Cyclops died during the Death of X event, poisoned by Terrigen mists. Wow, what a way to go. But after he died, he became a symbol, and even in death was inspiring in a way, leading mutants from beyond the grave. And then he randomly showed up at the end of Extermination. It turns out that he was actually resurrected through a plot of Cable's. Now, Cable had a scientist that Cyclops had saved, and he made him make a pill-sized device that could basically channel or redirect the power of the Phoenix Force. Cable then implanted this device inside Cyclops' heart moments after his death, and later in Phoenix Resurrection, when Cyclops is momentarily resurrected by the Phoenix Force in an attempt for it to try and seduce Jean to return to it, the Force becomes channeled through the device in Cyclops' heart, resurrecting him. So yeah, Cable managed to make this resurrection happen through some pretty crazy planning, science, and time travel. Pretty elaborate plan there, bud. Number 3, Jean Grey. I mean, how many times has Jean come back? She has to be one of the most resurrected X-Men on the team. However, not all of her resurrections can actually be considered real, as some were kind of explained away as basically being fake, like she was never dead. One of the most lackluster or weirdest ones actually has to be when she was killed by a Sentinel, and then only remained dead for like 1 or 2 issues before she returned. We don't really talk about that one a lot, but it happened. And one of the most meaningful had to be when Magneto killed her by shooting an electromagnetic pulse through her that was so powerful it gave her a massive stroke. Now, in the end, Wolverine of course snicked her to spare her from some of the intense pain that she was feeling. And although we'd have young Jean, older Jean would remain dead for over 10 years in the comics, only recently returning to the Marvelverse in the 2018 miniseries Phoenix Resurrection. The Phoenix brought her back once more, but Jean demanded that enough was enough and it had caused enough trouble, and now it should leave her alone for good. And it acquiesced, for the time being. You know how that Phoenix Force is. It's always gonna come back. It's a love story between those two, Phoenix Force and Jean Grey. Number 2, TRINARY. Considering the modern age we live in, TRINARY is a pretty powerful mutant. Her abilities allow her to control all tech that is within her line of sight. She has used these powers to move massive sums of money digitally and to manipulate and control Sentinel tech. Currently on Krakoa, TRINARY is one of the few technopathic mutants trusted with the important project known as Sleeping Giant, wherein mutants monitor for upcoming advancement in Sentinel technology, such as Nimrods or the creation of a mother mold, so that they can ideally put a stop to its development. Project Sleeping Giant were instrumental in helping the X-Men to destroy a mother mold that Orchis was creating before it went online. Number 10, Prodigy. I feel like a lot of people maybe forgot about Prodigy, as he's been MIA for some time in the comics and was depowered during the events of M-Day. But with the magic of Krakoa and Dawn of X, he was able to return to us, being resurrected and also regaining his powers. Prodigy happens to be a super genius, but this is also because he's a telepath with the ability to basically mimic anyone's skill set and share their knowledge while nearby. This has also been shown in the past to extend to fighting precognition, where he can basically use his abilities to read a person and predict their next move of attack in a battle, which is pretty sweet. He often also builds his own advanced tech, and even when depowered is known to possess a great level of intellect, making him a challenging adversary whether or not he has his mutant abilities. Even as a depowered mutant, you might not want to mess with them. Number 9, Melody Guthrie. Continuing from this point, Melody Guthrie, aka Arrow, has experienced a similar resurrection, though hers was more ceremonial than violent. Well, it was actually kind of both. It was kind of violent and ceremonial. Anyways, Melody is revealed in X-Men Volume 5, Issue 7 to be the first to undergo a rite of passage known as the Crucible. When mutants come to Krakoa in order to earn the right to be resurrected, they must give up their lives and reclaim their power and prove their worthiness, in a sense, in a trial of combat. Melody comes from a proud mutant line, the Guthries. You may be more familiar with one of her siblings, Samuel Guthrie, aka Cannonball. She fights against Apocalypse for the right to die in combat against him and be resurrected, or really be reborn. The trial is important especially for those like Melody who are depowered mutants. Melody of course lost her powers on M-Day, and when she is reborn, her powers are restored to her, making her feel whole again. It's kind of a nice resurrection, but also kind of a creepy one because the Crucible's kind of a whole creepy thing. Anyways. Number 8. Gentle. Gentle is a mutant with the abilities of super strength. I know, very hilarious considering his name. He can grant himself immediate muscle mass that basically allows him to change size and increase his strength when needed. It is yet unknown just how strong Gentle can make himself, and he is also known for being someone who could potentially even take on the Hulk, although he is more of a pacifist, hence his name. Gentle's real name is Nezno Abidemi. I hope I'm saying that right. Nezno Abidemi. I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong. It's a hard one to say. He was raised in Wakanda, but always felt like an outsider because his father was Russian. When his mutant abilities surfaced, it was actually Aurora Monroe Storm, who was queen at the time in Wakanda, who encouraged him to be sent to the XAVIER Institute so he could learn how to better control his powers. His vibranium tattoos are also meant to help him to control those powers. Also, vibranium tattoos are super cool, but I think they're also super painful to get, so maybe don't get them. You can't, because it's not a real substance, but still. Number 7. Egg. Fabio Medina might not seem like a powerful mutant based on his ability, but since his rise to the supremely important mutant group known as the Five on Krakoa, he can be considered one of the most important and powerful mutants around. When he combines his powers with that of the Five, he has control over life and death. Originally, the bouncy gold balls that he shot forth from his chest were believed to be nothing special, but it was later revealed that these balls were actually infertile eggs, which could be used in the process of resurrecting new mutants. Number 6. Tempus. Eva Bell is another member of the Five. She has actually appeared in less issues than Egg, if you can believe it, despite the fact that she has a pretty neat power set, and it's been neat since the beginning, which allows her to time travel. Tempus, as she used to be known, was able to control the passage of time in a specific pocket of space. She could also slow time in a current space that she also inhabited, either slowing time around her or creating time bubbles to manipulate time in that bubble, where she could speed it up or slow it down. The only challenge for her has been losing control of her powers, which can cause them to behave unpredictably. Still, controlling time is a pretty impressive and powerful ability to have. Number 5. Empath. Manuel de la Rocha made his first appearance in the original New Mutant series, where he was part of Emma Frost's team known as the Hellions. He's recently reappeared in the newest Hellion series from 2020 and proves just how powerful, but also how sadistic he can be. Empath's power is, you guessed it, empathy, and he can use this power to not only sense others' emotions, but also to control them, in effect manipulating others into doing whatever he wishes them to do. His influence can be subtle, such that someone might not even realize they're being manipulated by him, or it can be more forceful, turning his victims into complete husks of their former selves and bending them fully to his will. Number 4. Vulcan. Vulcan is one of the most powerful mutants around, being an Omega level mutant, skilled in energy manipulation and absorption. Yet he is somehow the lesser known of all the Summers despite his insane power levels. He has also demonstrated the ability to absorb his opponent's powers as well and use them for himself on the rare occasion. Vulcan is the youngest Summers brother, also known as Gabe Summers, and we only learned of his existence in 2006 when he first appeared in the comic X-Men Deadly Genesis issue number 1, and yet he is considered the most powerful of these three. Number 3. ORPHAN-MAKER and NANY. ORPHAN-MAKER still remains a relatively mysterious character, though is also one who still proves to be a force to be reckoned with in combat. ORPHAN-MAKER is also known as Peter and was part of a plot of Mr. Sinister's originally. However, when Mr. Sinister decided that Peter could not be controlled, he decided to eliminate him. NANY, an insane cyborg, however, saved him, believing it was her responsibility to look after orphan mutant children and protect them. Although I will say she's got a weird way of going about it. While insane, NANY was also once a scientist and remains quite intelligent. She actually outfitted ORPHAN-MAKER with weapons and a powerful suit to help her in her task. While it's still unclear as to what ORPHAN-MAKER's true mutant powers are, and while he seems to still have the mind of a child, probably due to NANY's manipulation, his suit and weapons make him a formidable foe in combat, and he often uses pixie dust in battle to help NANY influence and control the minds of their opponents, as she herself is a telepath, but a weak one, so she needs a little bit of help. Needs a little bit of pixie dust. Even during a fight with Cyclops, Scott's optic blasts were unable to harm ORPHAN-MAKER while he was in his armor, with Scott's blast simply reflecting off the armor, causing more harm than help, really. Number 2. Professor Charles Xavier. After Charles died at Cyclops' Phoenix Force infused hands, or optic blasts, we thought that was it for him. He was mourned by many and it seemed like he'd be gone forever. But then Red Skull got a hold of Xavier's brain and we wished he'd been permanently gone. As with Xavier's brain, Red Skull gained his powerful psionic abilities. Fortunately, the X-Men managed to deal with this problem and burned up Xavier's brain once they got their hands back on it, preventing anyone from using his powers again, and completely preventing any kind of resurrection for Charles. Or so we thought. It turned out that despite his body and his brain being gone, his psychic essence still remained in the astral plane. And when the X-Men went to fight the Shadow King, they actually picked up on this. In the end, he saw a temporary return as X through using Phantom X's body before he gained his own body again and returned more permanently later, wiping the knowledge of his resurrection from everyone except Psylocke, who he tasked with keeping him honest. Good luck, Psylocke. Also, in case you're wondering, if you're reading the new Dawn of X stuff, you're wondering why he's young, that's why he's young. Number 1. NIGHTCRAWLER. Never mind self-sacrificing in death, how about self-sacrificing in resurrection? Yeah, that's what Kurt's gonna do. When Kurt died sacrificing himself to protect Hope, he ended up in what appeared to be heaven in the afterlife. But despite making it to heaven, Kurt found it hard to relax, always remaining concerned for his friends, feeling like there was something more that he actually needed to be doing. When Azazel tried to use him as a gateway to get to heaven, Kurt ended up having a portal created between Jean Grey's School of Higher Learning and heaven so that the X-Men could join him in the fight and help him to defend heaven. In the end, Kurt used his connection to Azazel to bring himself back to life and to protect heaven by keeping it out of Azazel's reach. Wow. He sacrificed being in heaven just to protect it for everybody else who was there. Whew. That's some nice stuff. Number 1. Bailey Hoskins. Now, you might think I'm joking here if you happen to know the obscure Bailey Hoskins, but I'm really not. Bailey appeared in his own miniseries titled X-Men, Worst X-Man Ever. He was known for being the worst X-Man ever because his ability only allowed him to do one thing, explode. But he didn't have any regeneration powers, so he basically was a mutant who could never use his powers, otherwise he'd kill himself. It's kind of a one-hit wonder. So, how is that powerful? Well, it's also implied in the series that when he does choose to sacrifice himself and blow up the villain of the story, that he makes it possible for Earth 616 to come into existence. So without him, we wouldn't have the main Marvel continuity that we know and love today, potentially. If saving the entire continuity from becoming a dystopian future isn't powerful, then I don't know what is.
Coming in at number 10, we have Ultimate Captain America versus Ultimate Giant Man. Now, the Ultimate Universe is well known for being a bit edgier and darker than the regular Marvel Universe, and no two characters better represent this than its versions of Steve Rogers and Hank Pym, with Steve being a much more violent soldier and Hank being a self-loathing domestic abuser. Following an incident in which he set his ants upon his own wife, Steve Rogers confronted Hank Pym inside a bar against the orders of his superiors and demanded Hank change size and fight him. The resulting brawl destroys half of a city block, but ends with Steve still being able to knock Hank unconscious, showing that in this case, size definitely isn't everything. Coming in at number 9, we have Hawkeye versus the Incredible Hulk. While most battles with the Hulk turn into massive city-spanning brawls, this hero versus hero encounter is more tragic than anything else. During the event known as Civil War II, the Avengers receive a vision from the future that appears to show the Hulk killing most of his teammates. Given that Bruce Banner hasn't turned into the creature for at least a year by this point, the other Avengers are obviously concerned. Unfortunately, they barely have a chance to debate with Bruce before Hawkeye has shot a fatal arrow, killing Bruce instantly. And while it would later be revealed that Bruce had asked Hawkeye to do this to prevent him from hurting anyone else, and that Bruce would also eventually be resurrected by his own gamma mutation, it still was a tremendously dramatic and intense moment in an event filled with dramatic and intense moments. Coming in at number 8, we're taking a detour into the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Thor vs. Hulk from the third Thor film, Thor Ragnarok. After being stranded on the mysterious planet of Sakaar, are, Thor is originally overjoyed to see his friend from work, Bruce Banner. Unfortunately, the Hulk has fully embraced his new role as a Sicarian gladiator fighting under the Grandmaster, and Thor has to battle with his former ally for the amusement of the crowd. This fight scene is one of the funnest in the entire MCU, and has delighted fans ever since it was first shown off in the very first Ragnarok trailer, giving us multiple callbacks to other films and giving us a delightful new status quo for Thor and the Hulk. Coming in at number 7, we have Captain America vs. Star-Lord. Also taking place in the event Civil War II, this superhero showdown was thankfully a lot less personal for Cap than the original Civil War event, but also featured some heroes that weren't around for the first superhero smackdown. One of the most notable of those heroes was Star-Lord, who wasn't yet a big name during Civil War I, but had seen renewed success following the release of the Guardians of the Galaxy films, and thus was a shoo-in to be featured in the sequel. Coming to Captain Marvel's aid as she stood on the pro-future vision side of the debate, Star-Lord soon found himself in fisticuffs with Captain America himself, complaining about having to fight a guy with a shield. We've all been there, Peter. We've all been there. Coming in at number 6, we have Spider-Man vs. Iron Man. While these two characters have a close relationship in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and even fought on the same side during the MCU Civil War, things are a bit more complicated in the comic books. Originally siding with Iron Man, and even going so far as to reveal his identity to the public to support the Superhero Registration Act, Peter Parker eventually began to regret his actions and turned against his former friend. While Iron Man attempted to stop Spidey with a failsafe protocol built into his Iron Spider suit, Peter revealed that he'd already reprogrammed it, showing that sometimes Tony Stark isn't the cleverest person in the room. Coming in at number 5, we have the Black Panther vs. Wolverine. During a storyline in which the Phoenix Force, usually residing within Jean Grey, has chosen to take a new host, a tournament is fought for who should gain the honor. Two of the combatants that are given a small amount of the Phoenix Force for their bout are Wolverine and Black Panther, both of whom are eager to battle one another to figure out which metal is stronger, Wolverine's adamantium skeleton or the vibranium of Wakanda. With both heroes even stronger and more violent than usual due to their Phoenix possession, this fight nearly threatened to burn up the entire Marvel Universe. Coming in at number 4, we have the Hulk vs. Vision. During a battle with the Hulk, when Bruce Banner had lost control of the monster, the Vision attempted to use his density powers to make himself as strong and immovable as the Hulk, only to find the Hulk was able to grow past his own strength. To thwart this, the Vision had to phase into the Hulk himself, trying to forge a mental connection with the Green Beast and reach Bruce Banner within. The visuals of a superhero literally phasing into another are both honestly super cool looking, but it winds up taking both the Vision's mental attacks and the pleading of Betty Ross to finally snap the Hulk out of it and return Bruce Banner's mind to the surface. Coming in at number 3, we have Spider-Man vs. Wolverine, a battle so long overdue that Spider-Man vs. Wolverine is literally the name of the comic it appeared in. Following the murder of his friend Ned Leeds, Peter Parker is rescued from gangsters by Wolverine while in Europe, and forced to use a low-quality Spider-Man fan costume he buys from a store. Originally working as teammates, Spider-Man and Wolverine unfortunately come to blows as Spidey realizes that Wolverine intends to kill the villains they've been fighting, and has to take on the bloodlust-crazed mutant to prevent him from killing a woman named Charlie. Unfortunately, the woman winds up jumping in front of one of Spidey's fists herself, killing herself and traumatizing Peter in a very dark one-off that's probably best left in the 80s where it belongs. Coming in at number 2, we have Captain America vs. Iron Man in the MCU film Captain America Civil War. While their fight in the comic books is an incredible spectacle all on its own, my personal favorite confrontation is how this movie deals with its final battle, building us up with the expectation that Iron Man and Cap will have to team up to defeat an army of evil Winter Soldiers. A plot twist is thrown our way when the soldiers are revealed to be dead, and Baron Zemo reveals the reason he led the heroes out all this way was to show that Bucky Barnes killed Tony Stark's parents. Unable to accept that Cap never told him, Tony attacks Steve Rogers, and the two have a climactic battle that their friendship never really recovered from until the events of Avengers Avengers Endgame. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have Thor vs. Iron Man following the events of the Civil War comic book series. Tony Stark has made a lot of iffy choices in the comics, but few have been as disastrous as his attempt at a Thor clone. Intended to be a powerful deterrent against Cap's team during Civil War, this clone called Ragnarok quickly went out of control and caused the deaths of several heroes. Whenever the true Thor returned, he was furious at what Tony had done with his genetic code and fried every system in the suit of Iron Man armor, leaving Tony to walk back to Avengers HQ humiliated and defeated with one of the most decisive superhero smackdowns in comic book history.